You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
Hello and welcome to our fifth session in our Lent Prodigal Reflection series, looking at the Prodigal Son, as I've just said. And we're looking at the Prodigal Son through the eyes of Henri Nouwen and his book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, and also through his eyes to the painting by Rembrandt of the same name. Just first of all, an apology. I keep switching from Henri Nouwen to Henri Nouwen. And I've always known him as Henri Nouwen, and somebody's pointed out that he likes to be called Henri Nouwen, but I just keep going back to what I already know. It's a 50-year-old's brain, I suppose, so apologies for that. Thank you for all of those who've been in touch with feedback and with questions and with thoughts. As I mentioned on our first session, I've not read this book before, although Claire and I did go away on a retreat that concentrated on it. And I'm intentionally only reading it bit by bit before each session that I'm recording for you. So the point is that I read it, I reflect on it, I think about it, and then I record my video. So it's quite reactive. And that's what discipleship's about sometimes. It's about just being one step ahead. So I'm not here to give you any answers, and that's why our sessions are so full of questions. So thank you for the thoughts and comments and questions that you've been bringing as we've been travelling along. So today we've finished our little session on the younger son. We're going to move on to the elder son, and I want to bring in one of your questions that you've asked as well into this session. This parable is often called the parable of the two sons. We often concentrate on the first son, but what about the other one? What do you feel when you hear the account of the elder son's reaction? What are his faults and his sins? Do we share any of these faults and sins with him? Stop the video, reread the passage, look at the picture, and make sure you list or journal your thoughts about the elder son. Henri Nouwen says that he's always been confused by the other figures in the painting. The two prominent men who look on the scene of the father and the son embracing. If we read the story from the Bible, the elder son couldn't have seen the embrace because he didn't return until later. So Rembrandt is taking some artistic license. And Nouwen says that he'd always been a bit confused by them until a friend sent him a book which proposed that the two figures represent the tax collectors and the sinners, which Jesus has been talking about in the other parables around this, and the Pharisees who he's been talking to. So you've got the tax collectors and the sinners, the seated man beating his chest, and you've got the Pharisees represented by the elder brother stood hard-nosed at the side. This is what Henri Nouwen says. By putting the elder son in the painting as the most prominent witness, however, Rembrandt goes not only beyond the literal text of the parable, but also beyond the painting tradition at his time. Thus Rembrandt holds on, as Hager says, not to the letter, but the spirit of the biblical text. Barbara Hager's findings are much more than a happy confirmation of my earliest intuition. They help me to see The Return of the Prodigal Son as a work that summarises the great spiritual battle and the great choices this battle demands. By painting not only the younger son in the arms of his father, but also the elder son who can still choose for or against the love that is offered to him, Rembrandt presents me with the inner drama of the soul, his as well as my own. Nouwen suggests that the way the father and the elder son are dressed in the painting shows their connection. They are two sides of a coin. And he says that while we can be tempted to concentrate on the embrace, the painting is one of two halves, acceptance and whatever it is that we see in the brother's response. So take some time to examine the painting now, the image of the elder son, and on the other side of the painting, the embrace of the father and the younger son. But as we look at the elder son, let's imagine he's lost too. But how is he lost? Thinking back to how we defined home in our first session as being in communion with the family, how has the elder son left home? Are you able to identify with his lostness? Where do you sit with your siblings? Are you the youngest, the eldest, a middle one, or an only child? How does that feel? Take some time to explore this and try to see how you seem to your siblings if you have any. I'm a younger son, so maybe the freedom that I've been given to just go out there and do what I like is irritating to my elder sister and my elder brother, who have had to commit to family ties and maybe to have expectations put on them. My own son, my elder son, he's always been the one who has been the first to go through every situation with us as parents. By the time we've got to my youngest child, who's a daughter, perhaps she's had it easy because we've already learnt how to do some of those things, learnt where the boundaries are. But this is what Henri Nouwen says about the elder son and his lostness. The lostness of the elder son, however, is much harder to identify. After all, he did all the right things. He was obedient, dutiful, law-abiding and hard-working. People respected him, admired him, praised him and likely considered him a model son. Outwardly, the elder son was faultless, but when confronted by his father's joy at the return of his younger brother, a dark power erupts in him and boils to the surface. Suddenly, there becomes glaringly visible a resentful, proud, unkind, selfish person. One that had remained deeply hidden even though it had been growing stronger and more powerful over the years. Looking deeply into myself and then around me at the lives of other people, I wonder which does more damage, lust or resentment. I wonder if it's easier for us to deal with the younger son's sin, with the lust, or if we feel jealous because he had a great time and got off the hook. The elder son's lostness is down to him not being able to accept the younger son's return and embrace resentment, jealousy and grumbling. And something which someone mentioned to me a few days ago in response to these videos, which I'd never twigged, is that the elder son got his share when the father released the cash for the younger. The elder son has been treated exactly the same as the younger son, and he has his inheritance. And yet he's somehow jealous that the younger son has come back in such a state. So this truly is resentment then. Henri Nouwen puts this into perspective for us, I think. It is in this spoken or unspoken complaint that I recognise the elder son in me. Often I catch myself complaining about little rejections, little impolitenesses, little negligences. Time and again I discover within me that murmuring, whining, grumbling, lamenting and griping that go on and on even against my will. The more I dwell on the matters in question, the worse my state becomes. The more I analyse it, the more reason I see for complaint, and the more deeply I enter it, the more complicated it gets. Of one thing I'm sure, complaining is self-perpetuating and counterproductive. Whenever I express my complaints in the hope of evoking pity and receiving the satisfaction I so much desire, the result is always the opposite of what I tried to get. A complainer is hard to live with, and very few people know how to respond to the complaints made by a self-rejecting person. The tragedy is that often the complaint, once expressed, leads to that which is most feared: further rejection. Have there been times when we felt resentment for siblings who have done well? Or maybe in church life when we feel resentment for others? So Henri sums up this section with a huge challenge to us, which I want to read. It leaves us face to face, this is the parable, with one of life's hardest spiritual choices: to trust or not to trust God's all-forgiving love. I myself am the only one who can make that choice. In response to their complaint, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Jesus confronted the Pharisees and scribes not only with the return of the prodigal son, but also with the resentful elder son. It must have come as a shock to these dutiful religious people. They finally had to face their own complaint and choose how they would respond to God's love for sinners. Would they be willing to join them at the table as Jesus did? It was and still is a real challenge for them, for me, for every human being who is caught in resentment and tempted to settle on a contemplative way of life. As I started preparing this morning, I thought we'd cover the elder son in one session. But I think we need to pause and reflect. If we take Nouwen's call to put ourselves in the position of the sons and the father, then we need time to reflect on if we share the son's lostness, his capacity for resentment, for grumbling. Why could it be more difficult for the elder son to return home? If we already have our inheritance as Christians, how and why do we feel resentful? For me, reading this morning, I need some time to pray and reflect before I come back to see how the elder son can return.